Let's get into the Sweet 16 game picks and any upset locks that you have today. We'll start with Auburn versus Michigan.
Auburn, Michigan. I have Auburn winning this game. This is one of the few Sweet 16 matchups I got correct on both sides, so I'm happy about that. But I'm trying to keep a good trend going here with Auburn. They've been too dominant all season long. We've talked about how good these one seeds have been all year, and they're just too good. They have too many star players. A guy like Janai Broome, who had one of his worst games all season in the league, only having 8 points, shooting 4 for 13 and 0 for 4 from 3, 0 for 2 from the free throw line. It didn't matter. Baker Mazzara stepped up. Denver Jones stepped up. Picked up the slack for their best player, freshman guard Tahad Pettiford, who could easily be a day 2 pick if he decides to go to the draft. He came off the bench and he's averaging 11 and 3 for them all season. He stepped up with 23 points off of 50% from the field, 7 for 14, 2 for 3 from 3. So this team has so many guys on it, and it feels like they're just so deep that like I couldn't see a world where Michigan really takes it to Auburn. I think that Auburn has the advantage in so many different ways, and they, like, even if their best players isn't having the best game like he didn't last game, it doesn't really matter. That was a pretty solid Creighton team. They'd beaten Louisville, the like what we called an underseeded Louisville team 2 days before, and they, as soon as Auburn flipped the switch, it felt like Creighton wasn't in that game. It was a close game for an extended period of time, and then towards the end, Auburn was like, "We are the better team. We have the better guys," and it showed. Their guys stepped up, and even again in a game where Janai Broome had less than 10 points for like one of the only times this season where he's had less than 10 points, arguably his worst game all season. He had a good rebounding game, but besides that, the rest of the team really stepped up around him, and it just shows that they don't need their best player, possibly the best player in the country. I personally have Cooper Flagg, but one of the best players in the country, to even have that great of a game for them to be great against a really good team. So I have Auburn winning that game, and that's no offense to Michigan. Obviously, they had a really good season. They won the Big Ten championship, but I have Auburn.
Okay, well, I'm kind of in the boat of I don't know as much as you right now, so I'm going to have to just pick just based off of my gut. I'm going to go with Auburn too. I think if Janai Broome plays well, I think they have the ability to beat Michigan. We'll just kind of stick with your picks as we go. Michigan State, Ole Miss.
I have Michigan State in this one. Michigan State looked rough against New Mexico, but in large part, they're the better team against an Ole Miss team. Big Ten regular season champs, so ran through a really good Big Ten conference all season long. They can beat you in a lot of different ways, average nearly 80 points a game. They're leading, and I think it's interesting that BYU has a similar situation, but Michigan State averaged 80 points a game. Their leading scorer only averaged 12 points a game. They have a lot of guys that can really beat you, and I think that Ole Miss doesn't have enough firepower to get it done against Michigan State.
All right, well, I'm probably more so on the side of I'm on the side of Michigan State as well, but I think Ole Miss will give it more of a game. I think it'll be close. Okay, Florida, Maryland.
I have Florida. Don't get it twisted. Even through the struggles this year's presented, that was a good UConn team, and they have one of the best coaches in all of basketball, no matter how much he cries. And Florida found a way to pull it out late. They've played a lot of high scoring, close games all season long, and they know how to win them. I think that if this game is close at all, that Florida will be able to outscore them at the end and pull away from Maryland. And I also just have a little bit of hatred in my heart for this Maryland team in general, because out of the 3 upset picks that I had for the round of 16, all of them hit except for Maryland off of a fluky buzzer beater that should have been a travel, honestly. So I think that this Maryland team could definitely be had, and the Florida team is definitely better than a Colorado State team. So obviously it changes from game to game, but I think this Florida team matches up well, and that they'll win this game pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Florida, and then the analysis from the UConn game. That was a really good UConn team. Although I will say Maryland has been a sneaky pick, I think, for a lot of people leading up to the Sweet 16. So we'll have to just see how that goes. Texas Tech, Arkansas.
Arkansas is one of my upset locks this week. I have Arkansas. I didn't want to go too chalky. Obviously, this team is really good. They just beat a St. John's team, the only 2-10 upset this season. And I just didn't see enough out of Texas Tech this past weekend. They had the 3rd smallest margin of victory in the round of 64, really unconvincing win against UNC Wilmington. Arkansas showed me a lot against St. John's and against Kansas. I think that Arkansas can pull through and get a win for the underdogs in this tournament.
I'm kind of leaning towards Arkansas as well, but maybe Texas Tech could be one of those underdog teams or teams that are a little bit overlooked. Maybe not so much underdog teams that might show us something in this Arkansas game and people could start taking them seriously. We will power rank these teams as well a little later. Duke, Arizona.
I have Duke. I think that they're simply too dominant. Cooper Flag has been good during the tournament, but he hasn't had the great Cooper Flag games we saw in the regular season. Guys like Tyrese Proctor have stepped up. He hit 7 of his 8 threes against Baylor, which was absolutely insane to watch. If you had anything on Baylor, you just like Tyrese Proctor definitely isn't your favorite person. He was absolutely unconscious in that game. The only way I see Arizona even competing in this game is Caleb Love having a traditional Caleb Love March Madness game. I think I saw a stat where against Oregon, it was the first time he'd ever shot less than 50% from the field in a March Madness game, which is kind of crazy because he's obviously been in college basketball for an extended period of time now. And then he's had some great March Madness runs, including the UNC one where they went to the Final Four. So the fact that this is the first time he's ever shot from less than 50% from the field is crazy in March Madness. But I just think Duke is way too dominant. They can beat you in so many different ways, and they haven't had a great game from Cooper Flag yet. Like they haven't had a staple Cooper Flag game, and they've still been able to win comfortably in both those games. Baylor never really felt like they took a lead very early on in that game, and ever since were down 16 at halftime, were never really competitive in the second half. I think that it could be something similar to that. They had just one final stat on Duke. They had the best point differential in all of the NCAA basketball this year, and it wasn't really close. They were 4 points up on the next best, like the next second place. So 21.4 was the average point differential for their wins or for just their games in general this season. So I think that they'll be too much for an Arizona team.
Yeah, I actually picked Arizona originally in my bracket, but that was because I didn't know if Cooper Flag was going to be healthy or be back. Well, that seems really dumb right now. I think Duke is rolling, but I like Arizona, man. Got a nice little soft spot for them. All right, BYU, Bama.
BYU Bama, this is my other upset lock. I have BYU. If you haven't listened to one of my patented BYU rants yet, they have 9 players that play over 16 minutes for them. They're a really deep team. 6 of those 9 players shoot over 50% or over 35% from 3. So just a deep team that plays a lot of guys and a lot of guys that can shoot really well. Obviously, Bama is known for the fact that they can put up a lot of numbers, or they were the highest scoring offense in the NCAA this season. I think that BYU could be one of those teams that can shoot them out of the gym and shoot right with them. So if there's any team that can keep pace with a really fast Bama team, I think BYU could be one of them. And I think that's BYU over Bama is one of my other upset locks.
BYU over Bama. Should be a high scoring one. All right, Houston, Purdue.
Houston, Purdue. I have Houston this one. I just don't. This is similar to the game we were talking about a couple games ago with Texas Tech. I haven't seen enough out of Purdue that I've liked in this tournament. Houston is the best defensive team in the country. They haven't faced a suffocating defense like Houston all season long, and they're one of the only teams to have maybe the only team to have 2 double-digit matchups in their run to the Sweet 16, which I think is interesting. They played a High Point team, which would have been a nice story, but it's High Point and then a McNeese team that probably didn't deserve to be there. Clemson, if they could have made literally anything from the field in the round of 64, they would have been there instead of them. So I think that that Purdue hasn't shown me enough over the last over the weekend, and Houston is just such a really good team. And they played a Gonzaga team that was 8th in BPI at the end of the season basketball power index. And if you take any stock in that, Purdue is 18th. So technically an easier matchup by BPI index measures. So I think that Houston should be able to get it done against a Purdue team.
Yeah, I had Gonzaga winning that. So I think I got to respect Houston a little bit here and side with you. Tennessee, Kentucky.
Tennessee, Kentucky. I have Tennessee. They are coming off, like, I guess a couple weeks back now, but they won they went all the way to the SEC tournament final in a year where, again, we talked about it earlier on in the season, was the best conference ever in a single year. So I think that they carry a lot of that momentum into their matchup against, or they've obviously made it to the Sweet 16. So they've carried a lot of momentum from just the whole season into March Madness. And I think that they're like one of the better teams left in this tournament. So I don't think that Kentucky really keeps up with them. And I think that Tennessee's just overall the better team.